There's a guy who went to America to teach karate and came back and changed Japanese fashion forever. That's it. That's basically the origin story of Kapital. But obviously, it's a lot more than that. Toshikiyo Hirata was born and raised in Okayama, Japan, specifically in a city called Kurashiki, in a small coastal district called Kojima. And if you know anything about Japanese denim, you already know that name. Kojima is the denim capital of Japan. It's where Japanese salvage denim was born, where the country's textile factories pivoted after World War II, converting from military uniforms production to something that would define global fashion for decades to come: blue jeans. But Toshikiyo wasn't making jeans yet. He was obsessed with karate. He trained hard, he got good, and eventually he made it to the United States to teach and compete in martial arts. Now, what does karate have to do with fashion? Nothing and everything. Because while he was over here in the States, Toshikiyo discovered vintage American denim, mid-century Levi's, old Wranglers, workwear from 1940s and 50s, worn in, faded, raw. He was part of that entry wave of Japanese collectors who started hunting vintage gold in America. Guys who understood that these beat-up old jeans were actually something special, something that back home, most people hadn't fully caught on to yet. He came back to Japan with the mission. Back in Kojima, Toshikiyo wasn't just inspired, he was obsessed. He went to work at a denim factory, spending close to a decade studying how jeans were made. Not just copying, really understanding the weaves, the dives, the finishing techniques. He wasn't trying to fake it, he wanted to master it. After those years in the factory, he knew what he wanted to do. He didn't want to just keep making replicas of American jeans for other brands. He wanted to make something of his own. So in 1984, he opened up KAPITAL Limited, a denim factory right there in Kojima. And in 1985, the brand KAPITAL was officially born. The name? Right there in the city's identity, Kojima, the capital of denim. He just spelled it differently. Now here's the thing that separates what Toshikiyo was doing from everyone else at the time. Japan was already excellent at replicating vintage American denim. The country's craftsmanship was arguably better than what the American factories were still producing. But Toshikiyo wasn't satisfied with reproduction. He kept asking, what if we pushed this further? What if we brought Japan's own textile history into it? And that question led to KAPITAL's most iconic signatures, boro. Boro is an ancient Japanese textile tradition. The word itself translates to tattered or repaired. It originates back into the Edo period, around the 1600s and 1700s in the north of Japan. Places like Omarari, where winters were brutal and fabric was scarce. People would layer and patch together scraps of hemp cloth, sewing them with a running stitch called shishiko, reinforcing every worn-out section rather than throwing anything away. It wasn't about aesthetics at first. It was survival, pure necessity. But over centuries, this act of repairing, of layering, stitching, adding patches on top of patches became its own visual language, a record of time, of use, of life lived in clothing. Toshikiyo looked at this tradition and saw something profound. He combined boro with shishiko, stitching, and applied it to denim. Garments that looked like they had 100 years of stories built into every seam, even if they were brand new. This was radical. At a time when fashion was trending towards slick, clean, minimalist aesthetics, KAPITAL was making clothes that looked worn, repaired, layered, and deeply human. It wasn't nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It was a philosophy, the idea that clothing should carry history, that wear and repair are beautiful, that imperfection is the whole point. In Japanese aesthetics, there is a concept called wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection and impermanence. KAPITAL's boro denim was wabi-sabi, made wearable. And eventually the rest of the fashion world caught on. Designers from Europe and the US started experimenting with boro techniques. What had been a niche craft from rural Japan became a global reference. Toshikiyo Hirata helped put it on the map. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, KAPITAL had a solid foundation. Great denim, a reputation for quality and craft, but Toshikiyo's son, Kiro, was about to take things somewhere completely different. Kiro did the same thing his father did. He went to America, but instead of karate, he went to study art and design. And like his father, he fell deeply in love with Americana, vintage bandanas, workwear, the counterculture energy of the 60s and 70s, folk music and hippies and bikers and all of it. He came back to Japan and went to work for a respected Japanese label called 45 RPM, where he sharpened his skills in dyeing, design, and garment construction. Then in 2002, he joined his father's company, and the brand as we know it today was officially born. Kiro didn't just continue what his dad was doing, he completely expanded the vision. He took Capital from a denim factory into a full fashion label, adding tops, outwear, accessories, footwear. He brought in his love of bandanas, smiley faces, hippie motifs, military references, patchwork quilts. He started playing with synthetic dyes, experimental washes, hand overstitching, things that had no business being on a denim jacket, but somehow looked perfect. And in 2012, Kiro launched what will become one of Capital's most celebrated and recognized products, Century Denim. Century Denim is basically Capital in a pair of jeans. Unsanforized heavyweight denim dyed with indigo, kashikibu, or Japanese ink, and then covered in indigo dyed shishiko stitching throughout the entire garment. It looks like something that's been worn, repaired, worn again, and handed down through generations. It feels ancient and modern at the same time, and the way it fades, there's nothing else like it. Kiro once put it simply, his father mastered the reproduction of American workwear. In their generation, the work evolved from workwear to powerwear. That quote says everything. Now, let's talk about the lookbooks, because Capital's seasonal lookbooks are almost a product in themselves. Since the early 2000s, Kiro has partnered with photographer Eric Vatek to create these deeply cinematic, almost documentary-style catalogs. Each season has a concept, a story, and they shoot it somewhere in the world: Jamaica, Iceland, Mongolia, South Africa, deep in the American South. These aren't your typical fashion editorials with beautiful models standing in clean studios. They're raw, they're cultural. They feel like you stumbled onto a film set in some remote place where time doesn't exist. And the whole thing is DIY. Even as the brand's profile grew, Kiro and Edward kept the crew small. No massive production teams, no bloated budgets, just the work, the clothes, and a genuine curiosity about the world. It's that same philosophy that Toshikiyo built from the beginning: heart over hype. Today, Capital is one of the most respected fashion brands on the planet, not just in Japan, globally. They operate stores across Japan, each one built with its own unique concept, drawing from the surrounding region's culture and history, and they're stocked at retailers worldwide. The brand built a cult following that cuts across denim heads, streetwear collectors, high fashion enthusiasts, and people who just love clothes that feel alive. A$AP Rocky has worn it, Pharrell, Travis Scott, John Mayer is famously deep into it. Writers like David Sedaris have written about it. When a New Yorker essayist is raving about your jeans, you crossed into something beyond fashion. In 2024, Capital got the attention of the luxury world too. French conglomerate LVMH investment firm El Cateran acquired a majority stake in the brand, a signal to the whole world's industry of just how significant this label from Kojima, Japan had become. The 2024 also brought a loss. In April of that year, Toshikiyo Hirata passed away. The man who taught karate in America, fell in love with old Levi's, went back to Kojima, and spent decades quietly building one of the most soulful brands in history, was gone. The tributes from the fashion community said it all. Denim enthusiasts, designers, collectors, photographers, people who had followed Capital for years, all came together to honor a man who never really chased the spotlight. He just made things with heart, and those things lasted. His son Kiro continues to lead Capital forward, and if anything, the brand feels more vital than ever. Still rooted in the craft, still deeply personal, still refusing to follow trends. Toshikiyo Hirata didn't set out to be a fashion designer. He was a karate teacher who loved old jeans, but sometimes the most iconic figures in the industry are the ones who come in sideways, who aren't trying to disrupt anything, they're just trying to make something real. That's what Capital is. That's what it's always been, something real. And that's what makes him an iconic figure in fashion.